Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the laundry room. I'm at an awkward angle because I'm getting lots of glare from my glasses, as you can see, which is one of the things about the laundry room. If you've seen one of our laundry room videos before, I didn't even clean up the crap behind me because I wanted it to be a really raw and authentic laundry room video. So there's some sheets and a pile of boxes and yeah, there's stuff going on behind me. So what are we here to talk about today? It's a really exciting day. It is an Asian Cinema Society collaborative video. I've done a couple of these before. And basically what it is there's a group of YouTubers who I am very lucky to be among, who are all friends, and we all cover Hong Kong, or not Hong Kong cinema, Asian cinema, I should say, on our channel. So there's Huss, who does A Touch of Film, and there's Jason, who does Martial Arts Theater 3000, and you have Flip Otaku, and then you have Shaz and Leon, who are fantastic from Hong Kong Blu-rays, and Johnny from Fanatical Dragon, Gary from Martial Arts Film Pagoda, and you have Andrew Amphlett, who I've talked a lot about on this channel before. He's a great guy. He lives over in the UK and covers all kinds of movies, including Asian cinema, on his channel. And I know I'm forgetting some really important people, but the point is, and I'll put links to all of the channels of all the other people in the Asian Cinema Circle in the description of this video. But we, we have like a group chat and we just talk about movies and things that we like, and we do collaborative videos from time to time. Sid is who I forgot from Cool Movie Graham, who is absolutely awesome. And I apologize for getting to mention his name. His channel is really, really cool. And he's a really nice person who has been watching these movies for years and years and years and has such a great knowledge of them. And I love watching his videos. So the topic today is 5 favorite Hong Kong filmmakers. I don't know if other people are doing like Asian filmmakers in general. I'm doing Hong Kong specifically, obviously, because that's the nature of my channel, and I'm cheating. And how am I cheating? I'm doing 6. Usually I do honorable mentions, right? So I was like, well, usually if I do a top 5, but I have 3 honorable mentions, I'm really doing 8. So is it really that different if I just cheat and stick another one at the end? I don't think it is. So I'm cheating and I'm sticking another one at the end. And the reason is I could not pick 5. I've been thinking about this for months, like literally for months, and I could not pick just 5. So I have 6, and I apologize. Let's jump right into the list. At number 6, and I don't think anything here, I'm sorry, I'm like in a really short chair. So I'm like trying to, I'm not used to sitting in this chair. It's not the one I usually record in, so I'm like trying to figure out my height here. Cool. So number 6, Johnny To. How could I not have Johnny To on this list? If you watch the channel, you know I'm not only a huge fan of Johnny To, but he's really important to me in my love of Hong Kong cinema and in the development of my love of these films. And he came along at like a really pivotal time in my fandom, and he's such an incredible filmmaker. And there's so many aspects to his filmmaking that are incredible. And you can go back into like the 80s and see comedies he made and action films and thrillers and like movies like The Big Heat and The Heroic Trio and stuff like that. But when I talk about Johnny To, really what I talk about is what I consider to be the classic period, which is like 98 to about 2014, 2012, 2014, which is an incredible run. That's like, whatever, 14, 16 years, right, of like incredible, basically being the greatest filmmaker in Hong Kong at that time for over a decade, which is really kind of incredible. I don't know if you can point to any other filmmaker in the history of Hong Kong cinema specifically and say for that long of a span, that person was clearly the best person doing it. And I mean, in that time, you had Hero Never Dies, The Mission, the Running Out of Time films, Full-Time Killer, obviously Election, Election 2, Exiled, Drug War, Vengeance, PTU, Throwdown, like so many incredible films. And Johnny To is great with character. Johnny To is great with story. Johnny To has a really unique narrative style. Not a lot of directors have that. A lot of times directors work with screenwriters to develop material. And I'm not talking about writer-directors, obviously. I'm talking about pure directors, right? But a lot of directors do not have a narrative style. Like someone who comes to mind immediately is Ridley Scott, right? Like if you look at Gladiator and you look at Blade Runner and you look at Alien and you look at whatever, Black Hawk Down, and you take these films from all across this big span of his career, Black Rain is another film, there's not really a distinct narrative style that carries across all of those films. The one on Mars, The Martian, is that what that movie's called, with Matt Damon? Like none of these movies have a singular narrative voice or style. Right? Really, they kind of bounce around. And you could say Alien is similar to Blade Runner in tone or whatever, but he's not using a similar narrative pattern across all these films. Johnny To is someone who very clearly has a way of telling stories that is unique to him, that you can tell is him, on top of being an incredible eye for like camera lenses and angles and camera movement, how that all edits together. Like I said, great eye for character and tone. Johnny To's films just have a really unique, specific tone that has to do with pacing, storytelling, character, camera angle, theme, stuff like that. And he's just such an incredible, like top level elite craftsman filmmaker. I couldn't not put Johnny To on this list. So that's number 6. At number 5, I have Ringo Lam, which should not come as a surprise to you. Ringo Lam and Johnny To me are like in a way very similar, but in a way very different. Whereas I think that what Johnny To is doing when he makes a film is telling a story. What I think Ringo Lam is doing is giving you characters. That's the key difference to me. It's like flip sides of the same coin. A lot of times thematically, their stuff is kind of similar, or in terms of the world they're exploring, their stuff is really similar. Visually, they're very different filmmakers. And Ringo Lam's tone and his pacing is very, very different from Johnny To's. But Ringo Lam really bores deep into character. And in a Johnny To film, the movie unfolds through narrative, through story, through interaction, through this thing that is propelling you forward from a beginning until an end. In a Ringo Lam film, typically you have an event that kicks off the film, right? Like in Wild Search, there's the murder. And then you have characters working their way through situations as reactions to the initial event until you reach a conclusion. It's very rooted in character. His films are very existential. I see a big European influence in the films of Ringo Lam, in the way that he looks at existential issues, the inner lives of his characters, their turmoil, the things that they're struggling with, what makes them who they are, the decisions they make, and how that informs who they are, and how that determines events and stuff like that. He's a very fatalistic filmmaker in the pure sense of it being a sense of fate, like decisions determine fate. And I guess fatalism, technically speaking, I believe that fatalism is the notion that things are predetermined to happen in a certain way. So in that sense, Ringo Lam is not a fatalistic director at all, right? Because there's no sense of like, it has to end here. It will become what it is through the decisions the characters make. And yet at the same time, the characters are who they are and they cannot change who they are. And their fate is determined by the decisions they make. And you know that they will only make one decision in every situation because that is a decision that they will make based on who they truly are. Do you see what I'm saying? Like the Chilean fat character in Wild Search, the decisions he makes are the decisions he has to make because that's who he is and he cannot fundamentally change who he is. Right? Even though there are difficult moral decisions to make, he makes the decisions he must, predicated on who he is as a character. And that's such a fundamental anchoring point of Ringo Lam's films. And so it's this weird thing of like, to return to the idea of something being fatalistic, it both is and it isn't. You have free will, but only in as much as you are who you are, and you must be who you are. It's this really interesting, and I see thematically, I see that in his films. Like in Maximum Risk, you see this very strong sense of the character becoming who he must be, but he is making the decisions that make him that person. And there's that struggle between free will and fatalism that I think is really fascinating. But I love Ringo Lam's films. I think they're really entertaining, but you can really dig deep into them too. He's got a great sense of location, like in Replicant, which takes place in Canada, you really get a sense of like the city, and he's filming around there and giving you an idea of what these people's lives are like. But his Hong Kong films are like so deeply entrenched in Hong Kong. He does such a great job with location. So Ringo Lam, I'm a huge fan. And like films like Undeclared War, people would say is like really second tier Ringo Lam, and I wouldn't disagree, but even still, I really like that film. And again, that film is so much about character and decision making, and I think that's such an important part of his filmmaking. So that's number 5 on my list of my 6 favorite Hong Kong filmmakers. At number 4, we have Jackie Chan. Now, this might seem kind of low, but it also might seem kind of high, right? Because is Jackie Chan really a better filmmaker than Johnny To? It's an interesting question. How do you define what makes someone a better filmmaker? So what I'll say is that Jackie Chan is really important to me. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Jackie Chan. And that Jackie is complicated because Jackie is, again, I'm struggling with my chair. Jackie, as a screen persona, is really what I love about Jackie Chan. Like, I love Jackie in movies that are directed by other people. Yuen Woo-ping, Sammo Hung, like, I mean, even Brett Ratner, right? Like, I really love Rush Hour. I think it's an incredibly fun movie. But you can't deny the fact that Jackie really has made his own best films, right? Like Police Story 1, Police Story 2, Project A, Project A2, Miracles. He did Operation Condor, Armor of God. And then if you go back to Young Master and Dragon Lord and Fearless Hyena, like, Jackie makes the best Jackie Chan movies. There are some exceptions to that, but he really does. And his innovation in the way that action comedy works, in the way that stunts work, in the way that modern action films exist in general, like the whole notion of like a hybrid martial arts modern action film as opposed to a pure martial arts film really comes from Jackie. And I guess you could say Sammo Hung to a degree, but like you can trace that type of film essentially to Project A. And then the Police Story and all these people like Tony Jaa, Iko Uwais, and like the Girls with Guns films, like all of these movies that do martial arts in the framework of a contemporary set modern action film come from Jackie Chan. Like, you can't deny that. And that's an innovation of his as a filmmaker, as a thinker, a producer, a writer. And he has a very clean visual style. And like, if he were a crappy filmmaker, his movies would not be as good as they are. They just wouldn't. And so you can look at his films and be like, oh, you know, he's not, I don't know, who's like one of these people that you think of as just being like this incredible visual. Like, he's not Tarkovsky, or he's not, you know, Coppola or someone like that. But he does exactly what he needs to do to make the best film for him. And he's excellent at that. And like the degree of perfectionism that goes into his film, like he would do like 400 takes at one point, didn't he, to get the fan flip thing in I think that was in Young Master, or is that Dragon Lord? I think it's Young Master. And there's like in Dragon Lord, I believe didn't they film like 40 hours of footage for like a 5-minute scene or something like that? Like, his degree of perfectionism is so essential to who he is and is such an important quality in the films that he ends up with that you can't deny the fact that he is a great filmmaker, even if you can't point at it like you can point at Johnny Toe and be like, holy hell, look at that camera move and the way those two things are cut together and like all that stuff, right? It's different types of greatness. But I think that Jackie really is a great filmmaker. And those films that he made in the 80s are some of the best and most important action films ever made, and were so influential on the evolution of action cinema. And just personally for me, I just enjoy the shit out of them. Like, I love the tone, the comedy, the characters, how affable they are, the fact that they're kind of edgy, but they want you to love them at the same time. And I really like that. And I like that tone that he strikes in that balance. So that's number 4 on my list of my 6, it's such an odd number to say, my 6 favorite Hong Kong filmmakers, which brings us to number 3. And who else can we have alongside Jackie Chan but Sammo Hung? So Sammo is another interesting figure because I think that you could say that Sammo's films excel no matter what role he's playing in them, as a producer, as a star, as a director. All of the films that he's involved with that are like the best films that he's involved, like the best films he's in as an actor, the best films he directed, the best films he produced, are all great movies. You can really see commonality between the films he produces and the films he directs and produces, right? So like a film like Pom Pom, and then you look at the Lucky Star series, you really see how those films have overlap and commonality. And the commonality that I think you see across Sammo's films, regardless of whether he's directing it, producing it, writing it, starring in it, whatever, but especially the stuff he's producing and directing, is his investment in character. And again, I talked about this with Ringo Lam. Like, this is really important for me as someone who loves movies, and especially someone who's a writer, is what they're doing with character, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, etc. Sammo is, I mean, Bobby Samuels, you know, and other people who know Sammo, who have done commentary tracks about his films, have talked about the fact that he's really invested in creating unique characters, that's something that's really important to him. Each actor should be playing a unique character that's interesting to the audience, that's engaging to them, whatever. But the thing that Sammo does to me that goes beyond just creating unique and interesting individual characters is his focus on character relationships. He is so clearly invested in the dynamics of people, how people operate as groups, individual small relationships between 1 or 2 people, 3 people, and then bigger relationships in group dynamics, like in the Lucky Star series, we have that group of guys who are like buddies and stuff like that, and then one of the guy's sisters and stuff like that. He's so invested in just the lives that people live, the way they live them. He's interested in friendships, romance, and family relationships, and also enemy relationships and how those are important to your life too, and how those help define you, as I struggle with my chair yet again. But it's so unique to him. You know what I mean? Like, Wheels on Meals is a Jackie Chan, Yoon Bi-woo movie, but it's a Sammo movie. And when you watch Police Story or another Jackie movie that Jackie made, and then you look at that, you see it's Sammo, and you can tell right away because it's about dynamics and relationships. And the same thing is true of Heart of Dragon, right? It's about those brothers. It's not about one character. It's about two people. That film does not exist without both of those people. And it's their relationship with each other that drives that movie and that informs everything they do and that makes the movie what it is. And Jackie's relationship with his girlfriend, fiance, whatever she is, and how those dynamics interact with his relationship with his brother, right? And how complicated that is. And I think that I love those movies so much. And I think that audiences across decades have loved Sammo's movies so much because he understands what's important to people day to day. We can relate to his movies because we have had relationships that look like those relationships on film, and we love the characters and we love to see what they go through because we've been through it and we empathize, and it's meaningful for us. It's not just cheap entertainment, it's a meaningful connection to other people. And I think this is something that you see with the best television shows too. I've talked about this before on this channel. I'm currently in the middle of Stranger Things 4. I'm a huge fan of Stranger Things. I love all the seasons. I love all the stuff that even people don't like about it, etc., etc. I'm not going to get into that right now, but something that occurred to me when I was watching Stranger Things 4 last night, and please, for the love of God, do not spoil anything for me because I'm only halfway through. And like I said, I love this show, so please don't spoil it for me. But one of the things they do so well in that show is they give you the character moments. Like, right away you have a hook in that show because it's supernatural, it's 80s pastiche, it has that built-in nostalgia, that amazing music, it's got a great visual design that's really reminiscent of like Spielberg, James Cameron, and all that stuff. And like in the season that I'm watching, Stranger Things 4 is very heavily influenced by like slasher films and Hellraiser and like stuff like that. And so there's a baked-in nostalgia that makes you love it right away if you grew up in that era and on that stuff, as I did, right? But more so than all of that, it's the character relationships, the way they evolve, the way they change, the way that that show deals very directly and earnestly with the problems of like kids experiencing trauma and things like that. And without those character relationships, I don't think that show would be nearly as successful. And they realize, the makers of that show, that's what's really important. They've created this incredible world. And that's what hooks you. But you're not going to stay if you don't care about those people. That's true of The Office. It's true of Friends. All of these shows that people watch over and over and over again, Always Sunny, Seinfeld, you're watching them because of the characters. Once you put aside whatever that hook is that pulls you in, even Star Wars, right? Like Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Darth Vader, Han Solo, Chewie, you love those people, and whatever Chewie is, you love those creatures. You know what I mean? But the point that I'm making is that I think Sammo Hung fundamentally understands something that you can't really teach. You can kind of learn it, you can kind of teach it, but it comes from your own personal experience and your place of having relationships with other people. And Sammo is just an expert at that. And I think that even though he has kind of a plain visual style, which people complain about, I don't like, he's not super ostentatious. He gets out of the way because his focus as a filmmaker is entertainment, action, character, comedy, right? Get the fuck out of the way as a filmmaker and let those things tell themselves. That's his philosophy. You don't have to like that, but you can't say it's bad just because he has a distinct approach that might not be as visually ornamental or ostentatious as another filmmaker. So that's number 3 on my list of my 6 favorite Hong Kong filmmakers. So let me take a break here, and I do have some honorable mentions, as always. So my number 1 honorable mention is Chor Yun. Chor Yun passed away recently, and I did a tribute video to Chor Yun, so you'll know that I really love Chor Yun. Chor Yun is a Shaw Brothers filmmaker Chor Yun is very, very instrumental in the championing of Cantonese language cinema in the 70s, at a time when most stuff was being made in Mandarin, and was a big influence on bringing in that wave of Cantonese language comedies in the 70s that would then inform Sammo and Jackie and stuff like that. Chor Yun has such a unique narrative style. I talked about this with Johnny To as well. And Chor Yun was a writer as well, so it's a little bit different than Johnny To, because Chor Yun would write his own scripts, right? So he would craft the narrative as a writer and then direct the film. But he's got a really unique visual style too, that you can tell just right away. He did not make films like other Shaw Brothers filmmakers. Like, you look at his movies and you're like, this is not Chang Che, this is not Lau Kar Leung or Ho Meng Hua or any of those other guys. Like, it's very obviously a Chor Yun film, and he creates frames within frames. He obfuscates things. His movies are kind of obscure and smoky and strange, and they deal with the supernatural, but they're also very intelligent in that they play with your expectations as an audience member. And a lot of the Shaw Brothers films he made, Black Lizard, Bat Without Wings, The Clan of the Amazons, right? That was him. Sentimental Swordsman. What's the other big one I'm forgetting? Death Duel with David Chang. But like, a lot of those movies are like among my all-time favorite Shaw films, and I couldn't leave him off this list. So number 2 honorable mention, I have to give a shout out to Jimmy Wang Yu. I've only seen 2 of his movies. Again, somebody else who passed away this year, very recently in Jimmy Wang Yu's case, and I've only seen 2 films that he directed, which are Chinese Boxer and One Arm Boxer. But based on those 2 films, I have to give him an honorable mention. He's just such an innovative, energetic, lively filmmaker who's so engaged with the form of cinema, the way that he uses camera movements, the way that he uses sound, the way that he edits. It's just so visceral. The way that all of his scenes build, there's tension, there's drama, there's narrative in every fight and everything that he's doing. And it's just such great filmmaking where he's engaged in every single moment of everything that's happening in his film. So I had to put him on here. Chinese Boxer is like top 5 Shaw film for me now. Like, it's just an incredible movie. And shout out to Jimmy Wang Yu. May he rest in peace. And my number 3 honorable mention, I had to throw Choi Hawk on here, because how can you not? Time and Tide is one of my favorite Hong Kong action films, which you'll know if you saw my review last summer. If you watched this channel, it's an important film to me, because that was really kind of the first heroic bloodshed style Hong Kong action film that I saw after I got into like Jackie Chan and Wong Kar-wai and stuff like that. And so, I mean, the Once Upon a Time in China movies are so great. And I like Choi Hark's Knockoff. I think that's a really, really fun movie and an underrated movie. I also think The Master is a really fun, really underrated film. And what's the other one I'm thinking of? I had a conversation with Arne Venema about Choi Hawk, where he talked about his love of comic books and just the way that he looks at things differently. And he's always trying to push what you can do with the camera, and like using motion control cameras when that technology became available, just putting the camera in weird places and unique angles, and like the energy of his filmmaking, the zaniness of it, the humor, the action. I just think he's a great filmmaker. And I think a lot of people would probably put him in their top 5, because he's so influential and has made so many incredible films, and as a producer too. I mean, he's like one of the most important figures in, since the late 70s, I guess early 80s in Hong Kong cinema. He's really just like this colossal figure in the history of the film. So I had to throw him on as an honorable mention. So now we get into my top 2. It was very hard for me to put the people on this list in order. Now I'll talk about that in a second. But at number 2, I have John Woo. Because how can you not have John Woo on a list like this? And again, you get into the nitty-gritty. How do you determine what makes someone a better director than someone else? I watch Jackie Chan movies more often than I watch John Woo movies, but that's because of Jackie Chan as a performer, not because of Jackie as a filmmaker. It was hard for me with Sammo and John Woo to really decide who I should put it 2 and who I should put it 3, but I ultimately gave it to John Woo. His influence is just overwhelming. He's such an incredible visual thinker. The number of setups he's doing in every film, the fact that he's filming with multiple cameras simultaneously, the amount of footage that he must get for these films, like a movie like Hard Boiled, it's almost overwhelming to think about how he's seeing in his head every single thing that's going to be happening, where all the cameras are going to be, what they're going to be shooting, how it's going to cut together. And he really is an astounding, unique figure in the history of filmmaking, not just action cinema, not just Hong Kong cinema. But I think that you really have to say, as I mentioned Jackie Chan and the evolution of modern action cinema, I think that John Woo in a way is like a pivotal point in action cinema, because I think that action cinema pre-John Woo and action cinema post-John Woo are different things. John Woo and James Cameron, in a way, are kind of like parallel versions of one another. They're contemporaries, obviously, right? Because A Better Tomorrow came out the same year as Aliens, and those were both such huge movies. And I really think that the two of them created what is the modern action film. And I know I said Jackie did that with Project A and whatever, but I think that in terms of guns, in terms of the way they use characters, the way they tell longer, big stories with an emotional core that have a serious tone, but are rooted in the emotions between the characters. Like, and if you look at like a movie like Terminator 2, and if you look at a movie like Hardboiled, I really see so many similarities between those two in the narrative style, in the tone, in the relationships between the characters. I really think that those two guys are fundamental in forming what is an action film now, what we consider action cinema. And John Woo is just, his influence is impossible to deny. And yet again, as I said with Ringo Lam, with Sammo Hung, character is so important to John Woo, and the relationships between characters, their emotions, like without Tequila, without the Tony Leung character, without the Anthony Wong character, right, with that horrible shit that he does, you don't have Hardboiled. You just have a movie with people shooting each other. In The Killer, without that Chow Yun-fat character, without that Danny Lee character, without that Sally Ye character, you don't have the same movie. And I mean, A Better Tomorrow is just all about relationships. It's about brothers. It's about romance. It's about friendship. It's about moral decisions and choices that you have to make and how you end up on different sides of the law. And the second film is very much about that too, and Bullet in the Head as well, is about friendship and decisions and morality. And John Woo very much makes films about good people in bad situations, I think, in a way, which is similar to Ringo Lam. I think that John Woo is much more sentimental than Ringo Lam. And I think that part of that might be his Catholicism coming through, because, he wanted to be a priest. Scorsese has a very similar story, right? It was like priest or filmmaker, because John Woo wanted to help people. He wanted to do something that would make the world better, and he became a filmmaker. And you do see the Chang Che influence in the fraternal relationships that John Woo explores, but I think it would be impossible to overestimate the influence John Woo has had on cinema around the world, and especially action films. So I couldn't not put him on my list, and I couldn't not put him near the very, very, very top. So who's at number one? You probably already know. If you watch this channel, if you know which filmmakers I love, I've already mentioned him in this list. It's Wong Kar-wai. Because how could I not? I couldn't not put him on the list. And as I was making the list, I couldn't not put him anywhere but number one. And it's just, he does something that I cannot define that just moves me. The way that he uses images, music, characters, the voiceover, his narrative style, the Christopher Doyle style of shooting, and how that all combines, it just touches me in a really fundamental emotional way. It's like a direct communication with that art. It's like when you listen to music and it just moves you, whatever it is, if it's Pink Floyd, if it's Radiohead, like those songs that just get into your soul and move you, right? That's what Wong Kar-wai is to me. And you can pick it apart and say he's very kind of nostalgic, and he's very romantic, and it's very whimsical, and it's very ethereal and dreamlike and all these things, but it really just is the way that his personality imbues everything that he does with that kind of romantic, sad, melancholic world vision that I just really relate to, and that I really, really love. Like, the movies that he makes are some of my favorite films of all time. My 5 favorite movies of his are I can't pick apart which ones I like the best. It's so hard for me to rank them, and they are among my favorite movies ever. It's Fallen Angels, 2046, In the Mood for Love, Chungking Express, and As Tears Go By. And they're all such great, incredible films, and you just can't. I was talking to Arnav about, actually, I talked to him yesterday, and we were talking about identity and memory and dreams and nostalgia, and what makes, and Arnav Venema is not a Wong Kar-wai fan. I think it's really interesting that he can talk about this, and he can talk about what he does so well and what makes him great, and he's not even really a fan of his films, right? But what he said was that Wong Kar-wai creates a nostalgia and a love for something that never existed. But in your mind, it does. These places in his films, they never really exist. They're not the real world, but they're the same type of nostalgic, fuzzy, dreamy, romantic stuff that you remember in your mind when you think back on your life. And that's what makes it so incredible and beautiful and profound and moving. So Wong Kar-wai, I have to put him at the top as my favorite director slash filmmaker in Hong Kong cinema, because there's just something about him I can't quite define that elevates what he does to this kind of vaunted status in my love of cinema as being just like truly one of the greats worldwide. So my name is Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. I invite you to leave in the comments your list of your favorite Hong Kong directors, filmmakers, whatever you want to call them. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you next time.